Book 1, Canto 11. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Morgan Scorpion. The Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Book 1. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. Canto 11. The knight with that old dragon fights 2 days incessantly. The third him overthrows, and gains most glorious victory. High time now gan it wex for Una fair to think of those her captive parents dear, and their forwasted kingdom to repair. Whereto whenas they now approached near, with hearty words her knight she gan to cheer, and in her modest manner thus bespake: Dear knight, as dear as ever knight was dear, that all these sorrows suffer for my sake, high heaven behold the tedious toil ye for me take. Now are we come unto my native soil, and to the place where all our perils dwell. Here haunts that fiend, and does his daily spoil. Therefore henceforth be at your keeping well, and ever ready for your foeman fell. The spark of noble courage now awake, and strive your excellent self to excell, that shall ye evermore renowmed make above all knights on earth that battle undertake. And pointing forth, lo yonder is, said fhe, the brazen tower, in which my parents dear for dread of that huge fiend imprisoned be, whom I from farre see on the walls appear, whose sight my feeble soul doth greatly cheer. And on the top of all I do espy the watchman waiting tidings glad to hear, that my parents might I happily unto you bring, to ease you of your misery. With that they heard a roaring hideous sound, that all the air with terror filled wide, and seemed uneath to shake the steadfast ground. Eftsoons that dreadful dragon they espide, where stretcht he lay upon the sunny side of a great hill, himself like a great hill. But all so soon, as he from farre descried those glistering armes that heaven with light did fill, he roused himself full blythe, and hastened them until. Then bad the knight his lady yeed aloof, and to an hill herself withdraw aside, from whence she might behold that battels proof, and eke be safe from danger farre descried. She him obeyd, and turned a little wide. Now, O thou sacred Muse, most learned dame, faire impe of Phoebus and his aged bride, the nurse of time and everlasting fame, that warlike hands ennoblest with immortal name. O gently come into my feeble breast, come gently, but not with that mighty rage, wherewith the martial troupes thou dost infest, and hearts of great heroes doest enrage. That nought their kindled courage may assuage, soon as thy dreadful trump begins to sound. The God of War, with his fierce equipage thou dost awake, sleep never he so sound, and scared nations dost with horror stern astound. Faire Goddeffe, lay that furious fit aside, till I of warres and bloody marles do fing, and Britain fields with Sarazin blood bedyed, twixt that great Faerie Queene and Paynim King, that with their horror heaven and earth did wring. A work of labour long, and endless prayse, but now a while let down that haughty string, and to my tunes thy second tenor rayse, that I this man of God his godly armes may blaze. By this the dreadful beast drew nigh to hand, half flying and half footing in his haste, that with his largeness measured much land, and made wide shadow under his huge waist, as mountain doth the valley overcaft. Approaching nigh, he reared high afore his body monftrous, horrible, and vaft, which to increafe his wondrous greatneffe more, was swoln with wrath, and poyfon, and with bloody gore. And over all with brazen scales was armed, like plated cote of steele, so couched near, that nought mote pierce, ne might his courfe be harmed with dint of sword, nor push of pointed speare. Which as an eagle, seeing prey appear, his airy plumes doth rouse, full rudely dight, so shaked he, that horror was to hear, for as the clashing of an armour bright, such noyfe his roused scales did fend unto the night. His flaggy wings, when forth he did difplay, were like 2 sails, in which the hollow wind Is gathered full, and worketh fpeedy way. And eke the penners, that did his pinions bynd, Were like maineards, with flying canvas lynd, With which whenas him lift the aire to beat, And there by force unwonted paffage fynd. The clouds before him fled for terror great, And all the heavens stood ftill amazed with his threat. His huge long taile wound up in 100 folds, Does overfpread his long braffe fcaly backe, Whofe wreathed borts when ever he unfolds, And thicke entangled knots adowne does flacke. Bespotted with all fhields of red and blacke, It fweepeth all the land behind him farre, And of 3 furlongs does but little lacke, And at the point 2 ftings infixed are, Both deadly fharpe, that fharpeft fteele exceeden farre. But ftings and fharpeft fteele did farre exceed The fharpnefle of his cruel rending clawes. Dead was it fure as death indeed, What ever thing does touch his ravenous pawes, Or what within his reach he ever drawes. But his moft hideous head my tongue to tell Does tremble, for his deepe devouring jawes Wide gapt like the grisly mouth of hell, Through which into his darke abyffe all raving fell. And that more wondrous was, in either jaw 3 rankes of iron teeth enranged were, In which yet trickling bloud and gobbets raw Of late devoured bodies did appeare. That fight thereof bred cold congealed feare, Which to encreafe, and as attonce to kill, A cloud of fmothering fmoke and sulphur feare Out of his ftinking gorge forth fteamed ftill, That all the aire about with fmoke and ftench did fill. His blazing eyes, like 2 bright fhining fhields, Did burne with wrath, and fparkled living fire, As 2 broad beacons fet in open fields Send forth their flame as farre off to every fhire, And warning give, that enemies conspire, With fire and fword the region to invade. So flam'd his eyne with rage and rancorous ire, But farre within, as in a hollow glade, Thofe glaring lampes were fet, that made a dreadfull fhade. So dreadfully he towards him did pafle, For lifting up aloft his fpecked breaft, And off bounding on the bruifed gras, As of great joyaunce of his newcome gueft, Eftfoones he gan advance his haughty creft, As Shoferd boar his brifles doth upreare, And fhooke his fcales to battell ready dreft, That made the red crofle Knight nigh quake for feare, As bidding bold defiance to his foeman neare. The Knight gan fairely couch his fteddy fpeare, And fiercely ran at him with rigorous might. The pointed fteele arriving rudely there, His harder hide would neither pierce nor bite, But glauncing forth paft forward right. Yet fore amoved with fo puiflant pufh, The wrathfull beaft about him turned light, And him fo rudely paffing by, did brufh With his long taile, that horfe and man to ground did rufh. Both horfe and man up lightly rofe againe, And frefh encounter towards him addreft, But the idle ftroke yet backe recoyled in vaine, And found no place in his deadly point to reft. Exceeding rage inflam'd the furious beaft, To be avenged of fo great defpight, For never felt his inperceivable breaft So wondrous force from hand of living wight, Yet had he proved the powre of many a puiflant knight. Then with his waving wings difplayed wide, Himfelfe up high he lifted from the ground, And with ftrong flight did forcibly divide The yeelding aire, which nigh too feeble found Her flitting parts, and element unfound, To beare fo great a weight. He cutting way with his broad failes, About him foured round, at laft low ftooping with unwieldly fway, Snatcht up both horfe and man, to beare them quite away. Long he them bore above the fubject plaine, So farre as Eugan bow a fhaft may fend, Till ftrugling ftrong did him at laft conftraine, To let them downe before his flightes end, As haggard hawke prefuming to contend With hardy fowle, above his hable might, His weary pounces all in vaine doth fpend, To trufle the pray too heavy for his flight, Which comming downe to ground, does free it felfe by fight. He fo difeased of his griping groffe, The Knight his thrillent fpeare againe aflayd In his brafle plated body to emboffe, And 3 mens ftrength unto the ftroke he layd, Wherewith the ftiffe became quaked, as afrayd, And glauncing from his fcaly necke did glide Clofe under his left wing, then broad difplayd, The piercing fteele there wrought a wound full wide, That with the uncouth fmart the Monfter loudly cride. He cride, as raging fea.